In the hushed elegance of five-star resorts where infinity pools reflect moonlight and lavender oil whispers through marble corridors, there exists a woman who has never had a real job, never filed a tax return under her real name, and yet, lives like a queen. She is known by many names, but those who have met her, truly met her, only remember the silk of her voice, the chill of her eyes, and the ruins she leaves behind. For 7 years she lived like smoke drifting through spas and sanctuaries reserved for the rich and broken. She did not come for peace. She came for prey. Over 7 years she married 5 different men, each one richer, older, more isolated than the last. She met them when their egos had cracked, when their marriages had ended, when their fortunes weighed heavier than their souls. And she offered them the one thing they couldn't buy, the illusion of being understood. This is not the story of a woman in search of love. This is the story of a woman in control of it. A predator in a silk robe. A ghost in a sauna. A widow before the wedding. This is the story of the spa wife. It began in Thailand in a place called the Banyan Echo, a resort so private even its name didn't appear on Google Maps. It catered to billionaires seeking silence and surgeons on the edge of breakdowns. It was here that she first learned the art of invisibility, not by hiding but by becoming what people wanted to see. She wore white linen and carried a book she never read. She swam at dawn, ate alone, never made the first move. Men noticed her not because she was loud, but because she wasn't. That's what drew Andrew Whitmore, a 52-year-old hedge fund manager from New York, twice divorced and recently betrayed by his own son in a corporate coup. Andrew wasn't looking for a fling. He was looking for someone who didn't know him as a name on a Forbes list. He pretended not to. She asked if he was a novelist. He smiled. She apologized for assuming. Within a week they were walking the garden paths together, 2 shadows pretending to be real. He told her things he'd never said to his ex-wife. She told him lies so beautiful he wept. When he asked what she did for a living, she said, "I listen." And that's exactly what he needed. The marriage came fast. So did the will revisions. By the time she left, she owned 3 condos, a Manhattan townhouse, and a quarterly payout that arrived like clockwork. She never said goodbye. She left a note. "Thank you for believing I was real." Andrew never remarried. He still visits the Banyan Echo every year, hoping to see her ghost again. Husband number 2 was Julian Carver, a 39-year-old tech founder on the run from burnout and allegations of harassment that were never proven, but never forgotten. She met him in Tulum, where the waves erase sins and mezcal burns memories. Julian had shaved his beard, changed his name at check-in, but pain leaves fingerprints no disguise can cover. She found him beside a plunge pool, typing furiously into a laptop. She sat beside him and simply said, "They'll still blame you even if you fix it." He looked at her like she was psychic. She let him think so. That night they talked until the sun came up. She told him about her escape from finance. He told her about code, about betrayal, about how no one ever really wants to know the truth. She nodded. He cried. Within a month he bought her a ring. Within 2 she had power of attorney. Julian didn't even notice when the company shares began transferring. He was too busy healing. When the allegations resurfaced and the SEC came knocking, she vanished. This time with 3 offshore accounts and his backup server. He never reported it. He thought she loved him. He still does. The 3rd husband was different. Older and dangerous. Charles D'Agostino, a retired Hollywood producer who had fled to a Swiss wellness retreat after a heart scare and a failed comeback. He didn't fall for her silence. He fell for her script. She became the role of a lifetime. A grieving artist who lost her fiancé in a plane crash and came to the Alps to scatter his ashes. She even carried an urn filled with sand and rose petals. Charles was charmed. He believed in reinvention. In second acts she let him think he was saving her. In reality she was disarming him. They married in the chapel at the edge of Lake Lucerne. He wore a white tuxedo. She wore a smile. Within a year she'd convinced him to sell his last properties, invest in an eco-retreat brand she always dreamed of building. There was no brand. No team. No land. When the last check cleared, she left during a blizzard, leaving behind only the urn and a single red heel beside the bed. Husband 4 almost broke the pattern. He was kind. A widowed heart surgeon named Dr. Lewis Park, who ran a clinic in Vancouver and visited spas not for luxury but for silence. She found him in the sauna sitting perfectly still. She said nothing. He nodded. They sat like that for 10 minutes. The next day he brought her tea. She thanked him with a look that said, "I needed this." Within a week they shared stories. Within 2 they shared rooms. But Louis didn't want to marry. He didn't believe in replacing grief. She didn't pressure him. She simply waited. When his daughter went missing for 2 days after a drug relapse, she was there holding his hand. When the girl returned, she made dinner, lit candles, and told Louis, "You can't fix everything. But you can heal." He proposed that night. She wore his ring with reverence. When he signed the new life insurance policy, he smiled. When she left 6 months later, she cried. Real tears. But she still left. And finally there was Edward Lagston. Billionaire heir. Old money. Old secrets. A man who grew up in castles but slept in security-patrolled penthouses. He didn't trust easily. She didn't try to make him. She let him watch her from afar. In Bali, she swam alone every morning, never glancing his way. It took 2 weeks for him to speak to her. "You're not like the others," he said. "I hope not," she replied. He followed her to Greece. To Morocco. To Italy. Every time she was already there, as if they were linked by fate. He finally proposed in the Dolomites. No ceremony. Just a paper signed under a pine tree. She thought she'd found her equal. But Edward was playing a longer game. The prenup was unbreakable. The trust airtight. She discovered the deception too late. Her name was never added to the vault. The homes were rentals. The jewels were fakes. He had been studying her for years. She was not his wife. He was his test. And she failed. Now she is alone again. But not for long. There's always another spa. Another man. Another story. Because the spa wife does not retire. She simply relocates. But this time something is different. She's changed her name again, yes, but not just for show. In a boutique hotel in Kyoto, beneath the cherry blossoms, she's seen not as a predator, but as prey. Someone is watching her now. A man who lost everything to one of her past husbands. A private investigator turned contractor. He doesn't want justice. He wants her to fall in love. To truly fall and lose. She doesn't know yet. She thinks she's starting over. But for the first time, the hunter may become the hunted. And in the quiet meditation rooms of the mountains, something begins to unravel. Her confidence. Her control. Her heart. Or is it yet another illusion? Another performance? Another role? The spa wife always wins. But what happens when the game is no longer hers to write? But there was something about Kyoto that haunted her. Not the city itself, but the stillness. The stillness felt earned, not curated. It wasn't the paid serenity of the Maldives or the polished hush of Aspen chalets. Here, silence wasn't luxury, it was legacy. And for the first time she felt like she didn't belong. The tatami beneath her feet groaned differently than marble. The tea she sipped in the Ryokan garden didn't come with a sugar packet or flirtation. It came with history. No one asked where she was from. No one cared about her accent or her jewelry. She was invisible not by design but because no one was watching, and she hated it. She needed an audience, even a quiet one. And so she found the most expensive spa in Kyoto, tucked beneath Mount Kurama, surrounded by steam and superstition. The kind of place that took your phone and gave you silence. She was checked in under the name Clara Beaumont, a name she hadn't used since a brief affair with a Swedish wine magnate who now ran a cult in Argentina. She dressed simpler now. Less linen. More cashmere. She no longer tried to look poor or rich, she tried to look timeless. The only giveaway was her scent, a rare blend of oud and vanilla, concocted by a perfumer in Oman she seduced over Zoom. That perfume lingered and someone followed it. She didn't notice him at first. He was good. Not handsome in the billionaire sense, but clean. He never looked at her too long. But he was always one meal behind. Always one spa treatment away. She only realized it when she changed her schedule. He changed his too. She tested him again, booking a private onsen at an unusual hour. There he was, checking in for acupuncture next door. Too close. Too neat. And yet when she finally confronted him, in the garden by the koi pond, he didn't lie. "You know why I'm here," he said simply. "You destroyed someone I loved. And I don't want justice. I want to understand." She laughed, but her spine tingled. He wasn't like the others. He didn't flirt. He didn't chase. He observed. And he knew her type better than she knew herself. He was the ex-PI of Julian Carver's former lawyer. He had been quietly building a case for years. Not for court. For closure. And now that he saw her in person, living, breathing, perfect, he was no longer sure what he wanted. But something changed that night. For both of them. He didn't report her. He didn't confront her with documents. Instead, he disappeared the next day. She told herself it meant nothing, that she'd go back to Europe and find a new mark, a new ring, a new mansion to haunt. But she couldn't sleep. She couldn't eat. She dreamt of him, not as a threat but as a mirror. Someone who finally saw her. Not the version she projected, but the void she'd spent years decorating with spa menus and wedding rings. A week passed then too. One morning at dawn she saw him on a bench outside a shrine. He looked tired. She sat beside him without a word. "Why didn't you ruin me?" she asked. "Because I think someone already did." It was the first moment she felt something real. Not affection, fear of herself. What if she didn't know who she was anymore? What if she had become the roles she played? She didn't cry. But she didn't leave either. They walked in silence for hours. Not as lovers. Not as enemies. As people who'd spent too long lying for different reasons. A month later she was gone again. But not in the usual way. She left a letter for him. No account numbers. No confessions. Just a question: if I stop being her, who am I allowed to become? He never answered. But 2 years later he received a postcard from Sardinia. No return address. Just a phrase, "still figuring it out." And a pressed petal from a white camellia. Her scent still clung to it. Faint. But unforgettable. Because even when she disappears, the spa wife never really leaves. 3 years passed like mist rolling over mountain stone. Quiet, weightless, but slowly reshaping her. She no longer chased rings, no longer wore names like costumes. In Montenegro she lived as a ghost. In Marrakesh as a myth. There were whispers of a woman in white who never stayed more than 2 weeks in one place, who tipped in diamonds but never signed receipts, who bathed alone in rooftop pools at midnight and left behind only a folded towel and an unread book. She was becoming legend, not out of vanity but necessity. Because the world she once ruled, luxury resorts and lazy husbands, had grown too alert. Too digitized. Too watched. AI flagged her photos now, even with new faces. Men Googled before they smiled. Wives had apps that tracked hotel keys. She had to become more than beautiful. She had to become untraceable. So she learned code. Not just for hacking, for vanishing. In Estonia, a quiet man named Viko taught her how to rewrite identities. In return, she taught him how to hold eye contact long enough to make a room quiet. She used burner phones the way others used makeup. One for charm, one for silence, one for escape. The fifth husband had left her with more than a will. He'd left her with enemies. And now those enemies were watching. Not for her body but for the cracks in her pattern. And so she moved like smoke through cities. In Oslo she posed as an opera critic. In Singapore she passed as a wine investor. In Buenos Aires she faked a limp and an accent and said she was dying. Each version of herself was stitched from memory and hunger. But there was one version she hadn't planned. The woman who stopped wanting. Who sat in a Vienna cafe in winter and stared at a man smiling at her and felt nothing. No calculation. No plan. No desire. Just cold recognition. That once upon a time she could have devoured him. Now she barely finished her tea. Was it age? Or had she consumed too much to ever feel hunger again? She began writing letters to herself. Not in journals but in lipstick on hotel mirrors. You are not real. You are what they want. Who is left when the game ends? She never answered. Not until the night she returned to the one place she swore she never would. The Maldives. The first spa. The beginning. It had changed. New owners. New rules. But the ocean was the same, relentless. She rented the same villa. Sat in the same infinity pool. But this time she was alone. No man. No plan. Just a mirror on the water. And for once she didn't smile. She stared at her reflection and whispered her real name, the one no one knew. Not even the husband's. Just one syllable. It echoed through the dark. Then she walked into the sea, not to drown but to dissolve. And when she emerged, hair wet, makeup gone, eyes bare, she wasn't her anymore. She was something else. Something older. Not a predator and ghost that finally chose to haunt herself. No more weddings. No more games. The spa wife was dead. What rose from the water had no title and target. Only truth. And it was more terrifying than any lie she had ever told.